Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I am joined again today by the beautiful Emily Cahill. If you haven't met Emily before, there's a heap of videos with Emily and I, so you can go and have a look there. But Emily is a registered nurse, a fully qualified naturopath, and she is the only kidney disease solution trained practitioner that Duncan and I sat down and trained in the world. There you go, Emily, the only one in the world. There you go. And Emily works at a great big cardiovascular unit here in Melbourne, Australia. So she's very well versed in all things cardiovascular and kidneys. She also has a special interest in cancer and oncology support. So Emily, thank you so much for joining me again today.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, well, you're a very valued member of our Kidney Coach community. So we always love talking to you. And I know from all the comments that we actually get on the YouTube channel how much people get out of the blog posts that you write and the videos that we put up. So that's why we do what we do. So always great to have you and your knowledge on. So we thought today we would speak about the amazing benefits of fish oil and why we are so passionate and why we love it so much when we're talking about all sorts of kidney conditions, from autoimmune kidney disease to straight chronic kidney disease. And you know, I wrote a blog post about pets, and if you go and have a look at that, it's fish oil. That is the number one thing that vets will recommend in protecting pets' kidneys against damage. So let's dive in. So do you want to just start by giving us an overview of fish oil and omega-3s, and we'll sort of just go from there?
Sure. So fish oil is made up of omega-3 fatty acids. So there's 3 different types of omega-3 fatty acids. There's alpha-linoleic acid, and then we've got EPA and DHA. Omega-3 fatty acids are classified as essential fatty acids because we need to get them from our diet because our body can't make them itself. So that's where we get majority of our source. But one of the problems is that most of the foods that we eat will contain alpha-linoleic acid as opposed to EPA and DHA. And EPA and DHA are actually the form of fish oil that has that therapeutic effect in the body. So we need to convert alpha-linoleic acid, I'm just going to start calling it ALA, into EPA and then DHA in our body. But that conversion is pretty slow. So only about 15% of what we get from ALA is actually converted. EPA and DHA, which are the really important omega-3 fatty acids, we can only get from fish and seafood. So if you're not eating a lot of fish and seafood, then you're really not going to be getting very much of this EPA and DHA.
Yeah, and it's one of those funny things, sorry to interrupt you, that I know a lot of naturopaths in the old school days used to prescribe like flaxseed and hemp seed, and I was like, that doesn't help. And especially if you've got a fault on something called the delta-6 desaturase enzyme that's responsible for that conversion, you just don't convert it. So there's no point taking these oxidated fats that say they've got EPA and DHA in them. They may, but you've got to convert them from the ALA. And most people just cannot do that. And then if you've got any issues with this delta-6 desaturase enzyme, which requires magnesium and zinc and iron, all these sort of things, then you can forget about it. So yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I know a huge part of our kidney community think that they're going to get enough from plant sources, and you don't. You actually have to have it in the sources that you said. So sorry to jump in there, but I wanted to reiterate that because it's so important.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah, no, exactly. Good. Thank you. Yeah, so that's right. And also as we get older, we're less able to convert that ALA as well. So just makes things a bit more difficult. So that's one of the reasons why people take fish oil, or why we prescribe fish oil, because that means that people are taking that EPA and DHA and not having to rely on getting enough of it through the diet. So I guess one of the main benefits of fish oil, and I guess probably what it's best known for, is the fact that it's really anti-inflammatory in the body. So we have, in terms of our diet, we generally don't get a lot of omega-3s, as I said, unless you're eating a lot of fish or a lot of seafood, but we do get a lot of omega-6 fats. And omega-6 and omega-3, I guess, almost fight against each other in the body. So if we have a lot of omega-6, it means we'll often have less omega-3. and vice versa. And compared to what our diets may have been like, you know, with our ancestors in a long time ago, they had a much higher level of omega-3 than what we do now. So omega-6 we get from animal food, so dairy and animal meats. And then it's also in a lot of vegetable oils, which means it's also in a lot of processed foods and things like that. And the problem is that omega-6 are largely quite inflammatory to the body. Yes, they're necessary as well, so they're still essential fatty acids, but they're very inflammatory. So if our balance is out between omega-3 and omega-6, our body's going to be more pro-inflammatory. We know that inflammation is one of the causes of most contributing factors to most chronic health conditions going around. So kidney disease, definitely, heart disease, high blood pressure, cancer, autoimmune conditions, you know, they all sort of can be linked back to inflammation. So having a more inflammatory body is going to increase your risk for any of those conditions. Yeah,
and funnily enough, you know, meat in old school, before our farming practices changed, used to be higher in omega-3 when they were pasture fed. So I know with our kidney community, we actually recommend you don't eat red meat. If you're not worried about kidney decline and you happen to have jumped on the channel to watch, if you're eating pasture-fed organic meat, they actually are higher in omega-3s because of the grass, but it's the grain-fed cattle. It really just bumps that omega-6 up even more. So that's also why over time from our ancestors, our balance has been thrown out as well.
Yeah. So I guess we'll go through some of the benefits of omega-3 fatty acids. So one thing that our essential fatty acids do is they incorporate into our cell membranes. So they make up sort of the lining of our cells. And depending on if we have more omega-6 fats or omega-3 fatty acids, it would actually change the function of our cells. So it affects the way all the receptors on our cells work. It affects the way our cells communicate with each other and the basic, you know, function of our cells and organs. And then I guess specifically, what are some of the reasons that people would take omega-3 fatty acids? It's really good for brain health, helps with reducing depression and anxiety. It's really, really important for the cardiovascular system, and this is something I might focus on a little bit later, but that is a lot of the studies with omega-3 fatty acids are to do with cardiovascular health. Just because it's so important there. It can help with autoimmune conditions. So we would often prescribe it to people with autoimmune conditions because of that anti-inflammatory action and because it's also able to help modulate the immune system. It may help prevent against cancer, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, Alzheimer's disease, and neurodegenerative conditions. So, you know, a lot of those sort of chronic health conditions, again, a lot of it comes down to inflammation, are all benefited from omega-3 fatty acids. Then I guess in terms of the kidneys, talk about that specifically. So again, a lot of the benefits come from being anti-inflammatory. So one of the things that happens in all kidney disease is that there's inflammation going on. And there's inflammation of the kidneys themselves and the glomeruli, which are the filtering units. When we've got inflammation, our body then has to go in and sort of try to clean it up and fix it. And in doing that, it can cause further damage. And that's where we can start to see things like scarring of the kidneys because of this, trying to reduce the inflammation. Specifically, I spoke about autoimmune conditions, and that is one of the areas that fish oil has been researched a little bit more, is particularly in IgA nephropathy. So IgA nephropathy is an autoimmune kidney disease, and they've shown that when fish oil are given to people with IgA nephropathy, it can actually reduce the amount of protein lost by the kidneys. So the amount of protein in urine, the amount of blood in urine, and it even slows the progression of the disease. And in studies, they've shown that, you know, even people who took fish oil for as short a time frame as 6 months had a reduced progression to end-stage renal disease. So super beneficial there. Helps with things like glomerulonephritis, which is inflammation again of the kidney tubules. And it's also been researched a little bit for patients who've had kidney transplants.
Oh.
So yeah, when it's given alongside, so cyclosporine is one of their immune suppressing medications that's often given to people who've had transplants. And when fish oil is given alongside it, it's actually been shown to improve blood flow to kidney, improve blood pressure, and actually reduce the number of rejection episodes that people have as well, and increase the survival of the new kidney, which is obviously, you know, super important.
So really, we would think that in the transplant teams, they should be alongside anti-rejection medications. Fish oil should be prescribed.
Yes. Yeah,
which all happens all the time.
Yeah, that's right. And it's been studied in people who've had liver transplants who are on cyclosporine. So one of the problems with cyclosporine is it's toxic to the kidneys. So it can actually, you know, cause damage to the kidneys, even though it, you know, it does have its benefits. As actually, fish oil has been shown to reduce that nephrotoxicity of cyclosporine. So people who have, and again, these were in patients with liver transplants, but they had improved kidney function when they started taking the fish oil alongside their medication.
Yeah, which you would think would on flow to if you've got on your kidney and you've had one, say, you know, the same sort of benefits are going to happen. So I think we can apply that study across to kidney transplants as well. So if you're about to have a transplant, thinking about it, even on dialysis, to try and slow down progression until you get to have a transplant and just to improve the health of what you've got left, fish oil is just such a must for everybody, huh?
Yeah, it is. It's super important. I guess I'll talk a little bit about cardiovascular disease, because this is a really important area, and it's sometimes I guess forgotten about. People who don't necessarily have diagnosed with kidney disease, who don't necessarily have diagnosed cardiovascular disease, it can be sort of a, you know, a forgotten thing to think about. But we know that having kidney disease increases your risk of having cardiovascular disease. There's a really strong link there. And, you know, I've spoken about in other videos, people with kidney disease are actually more likely to die from cardiovascular disease than they are from their kidney disease. So it's definitely something I'm always thinking about with my clients, is how can we protect their cardiovascular health? And fish oil is a really, really good way of doing it. So in terms of cardiovascular health, it's been shown to improve cholesterol levels, so lower triglycerides, reduce blood pressure. So we know that high blood pressure is one of the most common causes of kidney damage. It can actually reduce and prevent heart attacks and strokes, coronary artery disease, and death from any cause in people with cardiovascular disease. So I think there was a study that showed that it reduced total mortality by somewhere around sort of 20 to 50% in those patients.
Wow, that's very significant improvements of just adding some fish oil in there. So yeah, and I bet the quality they were using in the studies wouldn't be the kind of quality that you and I would be talking about. So yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's a really, I guess, important consideration. Some of the other benefits in terms of why it's so good in cardiovascular disease. So I said it, you know, helps improve cholesterol and triglyceride levels, but it also actually can help to reduce and even potentially reverse atherosclerosis. So atherosclerosis is basically hardening of the arteries, or it's when plaque builds up in our blood vessels anywhere in the body. And in doing that, it can start to reduce flow of blood around the body. And also these plaques can actually break off and travel. So if you had a plaque that broke off and traveled to your heart, that can cause a heart attack if it blocks off blood flow and oxygen. Travels to the brain, can cause a stroke. So that's one of the areas that they have researched fish oil in that it reduces these plaques from developing. but also it's been shown to reverse the amount of plaque that's there, as well as making it more stable. And by more stable, what I mean is that it's less likely to break off and travel somewhere else and cause problems. And we've got to remember that we have blood vessels within our kidneys, and then we've also got our arteries going to our kidneys. So if we've got atherosclerosis in the body, people often think about it just being in the heart or in, you know, the arteries around the heart, but it can be in any of our blood vessels. And so, you know, people do have atherosclerosis in their renal arteries. That then reduces blood to the kidney, it reduces oxygen to the kidney, can cause kidney damage, reduce kidney function.
I think that's such one of the leading causes, and I think that's something that's not talked enough about in kidney disease. Is my belief is that is one of the biggest areas of why people end up with kidney damage, because you're right, people are thinking hardened arteries and cardiovascular disease, heart. They're not thinking kidneys, but then that's why there's such a correlation. You know, you have that reduced blood flow to your filtering units, and if you've got a lifestyle of smoking or not eating right, or lots of refined fatty acids, and your filtering units are now no longer getting enough petrol into them, I guess, and you're running on a couple of less cylinders, you're going to get a backlog of toxins, and that just has an on-flow effect right through the body. And of course, then, like you're saying, kidney damage and things like that. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
What else do you want to know about fish oil?
I think the big things that well, there's a couple of things that are jumping into my head as you're talking. One, and I know I always go down these tracks, but I find that you're in a cardiovascular unit, right? Specializing in that. We know the amazing benefits of fish oil. It's fairly inexpensive to put in. We know, and I want to talk about quality of fish oil as well, but maybe I'm always just so confused when there's something which has got plenty of studies on it. Fish oil has pretty much no side effects apart from potentially its blood thinning issues if you're on things like warfarin and things like that, and if you're having surgery, and even that's, it's not a huge thinner. But you know, like, why are we not seeing it used in cardiovascular units? I feel like you want to roll your eyes, and you were very, very well self-contained there, Emily. But you're in the hospitals. And I'm like, I just find this stuff frustrating. Like, why don't all our kidney patients know about this? Like, why are nephrologists and their cardiovascular specialists not saying, you know, like the cardiologist saying, like, you should add some fish oil in here because it's got such a massive systemic effect on you with pretty much no side effects. Like, you should be getting it in your diet. If you're not eating oily fish and good quality fish all the time, then take a fish oil supplement. Like, why is that advice not being given?
Yeah, I wish I could answer that question. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Look, I think like, obviously I do, you know, I'm thinking about patients at the hospital here, not naturopathy clients, but, you know, I do sometimes see people coming in on fish oil. And so I often, you know, I'll ask them, what, you know, when did you start taking it? Why? Who recommended it? And I think in the whole time I've been nursing, I've had maybe 2 patients say my cardiologist or my doctor recommended I have it. And that's, God, thousands of patients, I reckon.
It's crazy. And I mean, that sort of stuff just frustrates me. But I guess if you're watching, maybe run us through, what are the interactions and possible reasons people wouldn't take fish oil?
Very, very little. So and this also frustrates me because often one of the reasons why doctors will tell people not to take fish oil is because of bleeding.
Yes, which is, the studies show it's just not that, it doesn't do that. This is my frustration too. It'll increase bleeding. I'm like, really? I've seen INR levels where they've not changed at all with fish oil going in. I'm using big doses. Like, where? Where's the studies? Like, where? Yeah,
exactly. So it all seems to have, again, come back to, there was I don't know, case report of someone who lived in, I don't know, it wasn't Iceland, but I'm going to say somewhere that ate a lot of fish. And it basically talked about this man who had constant nosebleeds. And it was put down to the fact that he ate a lot of fish. And that's basically where that whole myth came from. And then when they look at fish oil in vitro, so in vitro is when you're looking at it in a test tube and what it does in a test tube, has been shown to change some of our clotting factors. But the problem is that we're not a test tube. So then when you actually take that information and then test it on humans, it doesn't have the same effect whatsoever. And so, there's more, actually saw on the TGA. So the TGA is the Therapeutic Goods Act in Australia. That's responsible for all of our prescription medications. And there was actually an article by, I think they were a pharmacist who works for the TGA, looking at the evidence of fish oil and saying categorically it does not increase bleeding. So therefore, what doctors are telling their patients and the fact that they're stopping people from taking it is completely wrong. So they did, in trying to disprove this, they did a few studies, and one of them was actually people having open heart surgery. So they're having either bypass or valve surgery. So, this is obviously a big operation that does come with a lot of bleeding risks, and most of our patients will end up having to have a blood transfusion following it. And they gave them different doses of fish oil, and one group were getting sort of 10 grams a day, so high dose of fish oil leading up to surgery. Then they measured blood loss, and in the groups that were taking fish oil, it was actually reduced blood loss compared to the group that were taking the placebo. So they had reduced need for blood transfusion and reduced blood loss in the operation. And what they sort of, I guess, gleaned from that, and what studies have shown, is that yes, it reduces things like platelets sticking together, and it's got anti-inflammatory properties, which some of our anti-inflammatory molecules can have the effect of reducing, increasing bleeding time. It's actually, nature's really smart, and it actually has properties that reduce bleeding at the same time to balance that out. And I think that's what we sometimes forget, when we're just looking particularly at test tube studies and things like that. Even tested alongside aspirin, heparin, and anticoagulants like clopidogrel, again, in people having surgery, there was no increased bleeding risk.
Okay, that's great. I'm so glad that we covered that, because that's such a big pet peeve of mine too. So you've heard it from us. I'll get those. I've got a couple of studies, but if you send me the TGA one, I haven't seen that one. I think I've got the one that, the other one that you spoke about. We'll put the links in the show notes below, so you can take them to your doctor, your nephrologist, or your cardiovascular specialist or cardiologist, just to let them know that where they got that advice from was from this, poor old Inuit that probably had a blood bleeding disorder, and the bleeding disorder. So yeah, and like you say, like that's what I've seen too, that taking fish oil actually reduces bleeding. So now I want to talk dosage, and probably the biggest thing, and let's do this first, is quality, because I think the biggest thing we see with fish and with our poor old oceans is this heavy metal contamination and toxicity, and especially in things like tuna and some of our deeper sea fish that they're accumulating heavy metals, and heavy metals is something you and I will talk about in another video. But we definitely need to talk about quality. Like I want to reiterate, and I'll let you go into more detail, but cheap fish oil, they did studies, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, where they took a whole pile of fish oil capsules, and I can't remember if it was Australia or the US, but they tested them, and a lot of just cheap fish oil is vegetable oil, which we want to stay away from, because that is omega-6. It's pro-inflammatory. So fish oil ain't fish oil. I wouldn't suggest going to your local Whole Foods and getting a cheap fish oil off the shelf. It needs to be a naturopathically prescribed, high quality fish oil that's been properly tested for heavy metals and things like that. So did you want to go into more detail about that? I know there's a brand, I love Zinzino, that comes out of Iceland. It's got a little bit of olive oil in it. It's very palatable, so you can drink the oil. So that's what I'm pointing at my fridge over here, because that's the one I take. And I know we in Australia have a couple of really good brands that test for heavy metals, but I know that testing isn't as rigid in the US. And I know fish oil is something we're looking at maybe creating in our line, but the Zinzino product's so good that it's not high of our priority. So yeah, take me through anything else you want to add about quality into fish oil.
Yeah. No, I think That's exactly right. I mean, the quality of all supplements is really important, but I would say the quality of fish oil is incredibly important, because not only can you find heavy metals and environmental toxins and plastics and things like that in fish oil, because they're all things that can be found in fish, and that's where the fish oil comes from. But also we've got to think about the fact of oxidation. So oxidation is when oxygen has created things called free radicals. So that happens within our body. But things like oils are really prone to oxidation as well, so including fish oils. So fish oils can oxidize and go rancid, basically. And when you use oxidized fish oil, it actually has a pro-inflammatory effect in the body. So rather than having the anti-inflammatory effect that you're looking for, it's been shown that it's actually pro-inflammatory and toxic to the body as well. So making sure, that you're getting a good quality supplement is really important. I would recommend, if you're looking at fish oil, I wouldn't choose a fish oil that I couldn't get the testing information from the company to prove that they do test for environmental contaminants, they do test for heavy metals. And the other thing that some companies will provide is oxidation values. So where they've tested levels of oxidation, and generally that should be done throughout the life of a product. So not just when you first purchase it, but all the way to the expiry date and even beyond. The other way that sometimes, if you're not sure about the fish oil that you've got at home, you can sort of get a bit of an idea of whether it's oxidized, is actually the taste and the smell of it.
Yes, exactly.
So you're smiling there. And so just like if fish is going off, it's got that real fishy smell. It's the same with fish oil. So if you bite into your fish oil capsule and it smells or tastes really fishy, then it's probably rancid, it's probably oxidized, and I wouldn't recommend taking it.
No, I know some brands that will move across countries. So Metagenics, we know that runs all that testing. They're available in the US under prescription, same in Australia under prescription. I know Zinzino, there's a link on we maybe don't have it up yet, but there will be a link on our resource page that we're just finishing off at the moment. That one's tested the whole way through, and that one is the only liquid I've ever been able to take, because the quality is so good, you can drink it. Like, I can't take fish oil, even high quality Metagenics, it's too fishy for me. The Zinzino is so good tasting, I can glug about 20 mils of it and feel good. So that one's good. And I think Nordic Naturals used to be very good, and my sense is they're still running all their testing and doing all of that stuff. And you can order Nordic Naturals off iHerb. There'd be the three that anyone in the world should be able to get a hold of. But they'd be the ones that I'd recommend. So any other brands that you know of? Those ones I know are safe and across the world.
Yeah, no, they're probably the main ones I know for across the board.
Yeah. And then let's talk about dosage, because I know in autoimmune diseases, I use much higher doses than I say would maybe in general stuff. If we're talking about transplants, the dosages are a bit different. And then cardiovascular disease, do you want to run people through different dosages or what you would recommend in kidney disease?
Yeah, so the dosage range can be quite wide, and I guess, I always take into account things like, are the people eating fish, and how much are they eating? So, how much omega-3 fatty acids are they already getting? And then what is it that we are giving it for? Because that will also change the dose. So therapeutic dose wise, sort of usually around, I would say, 3 grams up to 8 grams, or, depending, I will go higher. What I do want to qualify that and say that despite fish oil being really safe, and despite the fact that, yes, it doesn't come with, problems with bleeding, if you're taking really high doses, I think it's best to do it under the supervision of a naturopath or a doctor or something like that. But yeah, for someone, if we're thinking about autoimmune conditions, again, I would generally dose higher. Cardiovascular protection, if you're just looking at, there's no really overt cardiovascular disease and you're looking more so at protection, 3 grams a day is generally 3 to 4 grams for reducing triglycerides, generally is what's studied. But yeah, you can go sort of a little bit lower dose. The other thing I do like to do is test people's omega-3 levels, just because that can help with being able to figure out what the correct dose is for that person.
Yeah, I love that. It's a really quick test we have in here in Australia. I'm sure you can get it in the US, and I can have a look at your lab results, which again will be up on our resource page. But it's a finger prick test, and it gives you an omega index. Really great test to see whether your cells and it's looking at your red blood cells and what it's made up of. And so it will say, is it mostly omega-3s? Is it omega-6 and 9s and things like that? And then it gives you this index rating. We want people around 12, I think, from memory, and the index that I use is about good. I was 14 of all the fish oil that I said. Ooh, Emily, go you. Oh, that's impressive. But yeah, I've had patients like 3. And so we want to make sure that your omega-3 index is really nice and high, but 12 is a good number from the ones that we're using is a good aim, something to aim at. So they're really great, and they're very cheap tests. I mean, lots of places just sell them. It's like, I think in Australia you can get it for like $30, $40, and it's just a quick test you send off, and they just send you back a quick report, and it will give you a breakdown of what's in your blood cells. So very easy to check.
Yeah. And there's Omega Quant, which you can order worldwide, also has a calculator on their website. So you can, once you've done the test, you can put in what your omega-3 index was and what you want it to be, and it will actually basically calculate for you how much omega-3 fatty acids you need to get to that level.
Yeah, we'll check that link in below as well, because that's something I use all the time in clinic. Very handy. Yeah. Cool. What else do we need to say about fish oil? Talked about quality, dosage, when we use it. I mean, I guess the thing too is if we go back, like, I guess hunter-gatherers, they, there's such a myth that they were eating a lot of meat. They weren't, because, if you're hunting for a tribe of 20, you may catch a wild boar once a week. They were eating mostly like leafy vegetables and things like that, but fish, very easy for them to eat. And you look at the Inuits, and the Inuits have very, very low rates of cardiovascular disease and low rates of autoimmune disease. And I don't know about kidney, I'd be making it up. I'd assume they'd also got low levels of that. And they eat, not many vegetables. They're eating almost just blubber and fish and things like that. And just, they don't have Alzheimer's and all of these sort of things. And it's because they're getting these amazing omega-3s through their diet. It may have changed as Western life has come further north, but yeah, definitely something to look at. I know with MS patients particularly, we talk about people being away from the sunshine, but you look at the Inuits and they don't get MS, and that's because they're eating all these omegas. So definitely something that you want to include in your diet. And I know a lot of people just don't eat much fish. It's just, fish is expensive, and then we've got huge issues with the quality. And if you're going to try and do it through your diet, the big thing is you have to make sure the quality of where it's coming from, because most of these fishes, especially your bigger fishes, which we didn't talk about, like swordfish and tuna and all those big, deep, the flake and all of those sort of things, they're eating all the smaller fish, and they're just full of heavy metals. Whereas if you're going to get it through your diet, you want sardines, herring, mackerel, the smaller fish, they haven't accumulated so much. But that's such a major issue, unfortunately, we have with all our environmental pollution and things going on. So at least if you're getting a fish oil supplement, that's been tested for oxidization and all of those sort of things, that, and I always try and advocate through diet, but these are one of the times that I think if you've got cardiovascular or kidney disease, that actually a supplement may be better than doing it just through diet, just because of the environmental impact and issues we have from everything going on. And also, if you can buy a company that does their fish oil sustainably, so Zinzino is sustainable, I think Metagenics is sustainable, because our poor old oceans are being raped and pillaged. So if you can support any companies that are doing sustainable fishing, that is also hugely important for our environment, because everything that we do has a consequence. So if we can be really mindful of that, that's good too. Anything else you wanted to add there, Em?
I'll just add in for people who are allergic to fish or vegetarians or vegans. And so obviously people who are allergic to fish aren't eating fish, but also vegetarians and vegans, if they're not eating fish, and remember that we spoke about plant sources of alpha linoleic acid being very reduced conversion to our EPA and DHA, then we need to be getting it from somewhere. So you can get supplements that are vegan supplements of fish oil, and it's actually from algae. So it's still got the EPA and DHA in it. It's just coming from a different source. So yeah, particularly important for those people who aren't getting any EPA and DHA from their diet to be using a supplement as well.
Yeah. And Metagenics does an algae, and so does Enzino. They've got a vegan vegetarian version, really good quality. So, and from everything that I've seen, the microalgae is just, it's on par with fish oil. They've sort of really in the last couple of years really got that to a level where they're, you know, EPA, DHA levels are on par, and it seems to, I've got quite a lot of vegan patients and they seem to do just as well on it. So, which is great because we didn't have anything to give them earlier. So,
yes.
Cool. Thanks, Em. Anything else you want to add before we say goodbye?
No, I think we'll leave it there for now.
So, blanket statement, but do you think anybody with cardiovascular and kidney disease should be on fish oil?
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
Blanket statement.
Blanket statement. It is a blanket, but yeah, unless you've got a massive allergy to something there. Yeah, so we'll put the studies that we mentioned below. So if you want to speak to your nephrologist or cardiologist, and if they've flagged you about bleeding disorders or they didn't want you to go on fish oil, we can give you the studies that you can take in there and have a discussion with them. Again, thank you for watching and being part of our Kidney Coach community. We hope you found this useful. If you did, remember to give us a like, thumbs up, and hit subscribe, and you'll get notified anytime we do more videos. Make some comments below if you want to say anything, and if you've got any topics that you want us to talk about, I'm always checking those comments, so put them in the comments below and we'll make sure that we do that. Thanks again, Emily, for joining me today. I really appreciate you, and yeah, any questions, let us know, and until next time, we'll see you then. Bye.